Hello and welcome to Gabbett Media. I'm Grant Abbott and today I'm going to be painting a tree stump. So you can see the finished result here. This is all part of the Atlas Empires modelling and painting that I'm doing. And all these assets will go into the final game. You can check out the link for the game and my website with other free courses and playlists with similar videos in the description below. And do check out the website because the videos are much more organised on there. So here's the model so far. I've painted the crystals and I've got another tutorial on that. And you can see how it's shaping up, but you can see this tree stump shape here. It'll be easy to see if I go into solid mode. You can sort of see what's going on there. So back to Look Dev mode. I've got my nodes set up to the viewer node, which is just an emission, but it's much easier to see when it's flatter like this, and I can see the real effects of the paint strokes. If I change it back to the principled BSDF, I've got flat shading on, so I can see the edges if I need to. So let's get started. The first thing I need to do is fill in and make sure I'm happy with the colour. I wanted a very slightly different colour from this wood here. So I'm going to experiment a bit with the different colours. Make sure I'm on mix mode, strength up to 1, and make sure I've got the right object selected. Okay, so just experimenting with different colours and different tones of colours as well. I prefer this sort of orangey look. It gives it that old Disney style feel, but I might go a bit darker, somewhere around there. Okay, so I'm fairly happy with that. Let's go to my draw brush and let's just add some rough variation. So nice big brush, mix mode, strength fairly low, and just dab around the place. Just to offer some variation in the colours. I'm not worried about overlapping that's going on here. I'll sort that out later with the smudge brush and other such things. But just giving some variation to my wood as if the light's coming through and shining on it in different ways. Varying the colour lots as well. A bit of blue in here. A bit of reds. A bit of pinks even. Maybe not the pinks. I might put some pinks over this side, just as if it's shining off this and reflecting. Only a tiny bit. Okay, let's tidy that up a bit with the smudge brush. Just making sure that there's no hard, nasty edges like this that are all jaggedy and all over the place. So not too much, just a little bit. Okay, let's bring the size right down. Back to my draw brush and let's get some lines in there. So this needs to be a bit stronger. And just going up and down, giving the bark a grain. Still very rough. Circles in the middle here. Some nice light colours now as well. Seems a bit strong for the light colours at the moment. Watch out for jaggedy edges like this. It suddenly dents into topology and you don't realise, so just undo those. If you don't spot them, then you'll have to use the smudge tool. Notice I'm not going all the way out my shape all the time. I'm just sort of doing little bits here and there and occasionally going with longer lines, so varying the strokes quite a lot. Again, different colours in here, some nice reds. You see an awkward jagged line there, but I'm just going to leave it in for now. Okay, that's a good start. I might just smudge some of these out just a touch. Okay, so that's a nice base where we can start adding a bit more detail. So let's get the multiply brush first. Add some crevices and knots and all sorts. I've got a quite reddy coloured brush, maybe a tiny bit darker would be good, and a little bit less red, just a touch. There's a funny glitch there. I'm going to have to check that with the UVs in a second. Nope, it's going over right. It's just a strange glitch in the brush, that's all. So I'll just smudge that out and back in. I'm trying to follow a sort of natural grain of the other objects as well, or the other lines in my scene. Starting at the bottom, there's no rhyme or reason to where I'm starting, just where I thought would be best. Every now and again zoom out and see how that looks. It's looking okay, possibly a bit dark there, but I can darken some of these up anyway. Don't worry too much if it's not working out how you expect. You just keep working and you'll get there. Right, I'm going to isolate it now so I can start seeing what I'm doing. Most of my work goes through stages, so it takes a while before it starts looking how it's supposed to. I think we'll have a sort of knot on the side here as well. Might be kind of fun. So just start by getting a rough outline of what you want, just like you're drawing on paper or in 2D. So I'm darkening areas where I think there's a shadow coming from the top. Notice I'm sticking to my multiply brush. I've not gone across to the screen brush yet. I'm just getting in the details and shapes and where I want them. Might just go to the principal shader just so I can see what's going on in here and paint the right areas. And let's start thinking about the insides just here as well. And in here, very dark in here. You won't really be able to see this bit anyway when I get the other bits back, as you can see there. Keeping the principal shader on so I can see my sharp edges, so I can get an idea where I need to stop with these dark bits. Might need to smudge some of this away. Okay, I'm going to go to the screen brush now. Nice sort of yellowy screen. And highlight some of these areas, just a touch. It's quite high still, although it feels high. Maybe it's not that high, but it certainly feels it. So these top bits catching the light, still fairly rough. So I'm going across the bits that are meant to stick out now. With the screen brush, I'll go back to my emission, as you can see there. And I've got the node wrangler installed for that. I've talked about that in another episode, so hopefully that's not new to you. But it's a really quick way to sort of see flat shading, not flat shading, but without any light, that's what I'm trying to say. Not much going on at the front here, that's because my objects stick out of that and I don't think it's really used. I could have cut those faces out really, and that might have helped me with the amount of pixels I have down here, because I'm finding it tough to actually fit everything in. Where I need to, I'll just smooth a few things out. It's definitely getting there, it's good fun this. Now for some finer details. Actually, I might go into isolation mode again for these edges here. Still with my screen brush on. Got to be careful not to make the bottom lighter than the top, and it is at the moment, so I'm going to go over it with the multiply brush. Get a nice sort of ready, actually maybe not too ready this time. I just bring the bottom up a bit. I say bottom up, but I mean the bottom down instead of but I mean the bottom down in terms of tone. Okay, we're starting to get there. Now I'm going to add some more detail in. Give it sort of a woody bark look around the place like this. I'll highlight these areas again in a second, but bark has this sort of, I don't know what you call it, a sort of blocky look to it. Well, in my reference images, some of my reference images have this, and it looks kind of cool, so painting some of this in, give it some more character. So if it's just these sort of swirly lines, it can look very uniform, and I want to have that little bit of character. So these are sort of splits of bark sticking out around the place. Not sure about this area, I think I've messed it up, but we can always smudge that out later. have a sort of dent in here. Just try something out. It's always good every now and again when you're painting, even though I'm doing professional jobs and you think, don't experiment with those. But every now and again I want to improve myself and see whether things will work. So I try different things out as much as I can, at least sort of once every model or every bit of painting. Even if it's something I've done loads of times before, just so I can practice and improve. And if it doesn't work, I'll smudge it out and I'll do the process again. Okay, let's go to the screen brush and see if we can't tidy some of these up. So I want them as if they're sort of sticking out from the wood, so I'm just giving them all a highlight like this. Let's see how we're looking at the moment. It's sort of working. But they need a lot more contrast. And a fair bit more work really. I need to work at the top obviously as well. But I think the detail's quite nice, but it needs more of it around the tree. So I'm flicking between the screen brush and the multiply. I'm not changing the tone and colour much. Just trying to make some bits stick out more and others go in more. So trying to give it all a bit more depth. As I've said before, I'm using the screen and multiply brushes, but I'd rather, if there were the functionality to do this, just sample the colours and use the colours like I do in Photoshop. I tend to hold one hand over the Alt key and then keep sampling colours and keep blending them together. But there's not really that functionality in Blender, so I just use the multiply and screen brushes for the same sort of effect. It's not quite as good, but it works. I'm going to turn on my brush size change there as well within the pressure sensitivity, and that means when I push lightly it will make a smaller line, and that should help me a little bit in some areas. So just building up slowly with these things, testing things out, looking for the grain here. So I've still got the multiply and screen brushes going, and I'm just smoothing this out a bit with the smear brush, and then every now and again I'll go back to the beginning as it were and see how we're doing. Still needs a fair bit of work, but we're definitely getting there. Once the branches are done as well, that will help. What I will need to do is put some shading in for these different parts as well, but I've got to be a bit careful because it's modular, so they're different in different places. So I've got to look across my shape and see how far away I can get away with those things. This is with no shadow at all at the moment, and I'm going to get a bit of assistance eventually. When this is put into Unity, there will be one light, so that will help. I was pretty happy when they told me that they were going to put one light in the scene. That will really help my models and really show them off in the best way, because the modular design has been fairly limiting. So I'm making the most of the light bits at the moment by going around and adding some dark bits to them as well. It looks like there's a cut and then the highlight sort of hits the edge of it. Try not to make them too uniform, which I might be doing a bit too much of at the moment. It's looking better at the top now, I think. Generally speaking, where you have a highlight, you're going to have a crevice as well, so you should always be thinking about highlights and crevices, therefore dark and light spots. Just got to smudge out some of these areas. It's a little bit tricky when you're using big brushes not to get some sort of overlap like this. But we're slowly getting there with the design. It's sort of happening. Now it's a bit colourless around these places here. I like the tiny flecks of red in the place, so I might put a bit more red in some areas, but I can use the multiply brush with a reddy colour or the screen brush with a reddy colour to help there. It's sort of working, but it's not quite there. It's not quite what I envisaged for that. Trying to look where the natural sort of lumps and bumps of the mesh are as well, and just highlight those so they stand out a bit. So they should stand out slightly naturally anyway. And it also offers a bit of variation to the shape and colours. It's a bit better. Not so sure about this, not sure it's working. It does kind of look like a tree, but it doesn't look like a cool tree, if that makes sense. Change this shape up just a touch and see if I can't modify it so it looks a bit more knotty and interesting. Maybe that works a bit more. I think maybe it looks out of place in the rest of the mesh. I'm going to attempt to put a few more things like that in, just for a bit of interest and variation. Now I may have gone too far with some of these things, so toning back now might be the best thing, but I'm going to keep working on them for a moment. I kind of want to keep the experimentation going. And can you see I'm putting a multiply brush around these so they sort of sink in and pop out again. I think it needs a bit more detail around the base areas, but I'm starting to enjoy it. I'm going to work on this top bit to try and get that into something that works. Not sure about my metal here, it doesn't look quite right, I don't think. So I might have to go back to that as well. I think this is just too much down here, so might have to just blur it all out, but we'll see how we go. So I'm just following up and down the grain to smudge it out. I don't really like how that went. But like I say, it's really good to practice and try different things out, even on final pieces like this, because otherwise you just don't really improve, I find anyway. You just end up doing the same things over and over again, making the same mistakes even, with the fear of moving on. It's a great thing, it's nice and organic, so you don't have to worry too much about mistakes here and there. So I'm just filling in dull areas now, so there's a big sort of blank space here, so fill that in with a few different strokes and vary the direction, obviously up and down, but some swirly roundiness. So I find even though I might not be happy with it at one stage, if you just keep working on it, keep trying things out, you do generally sort of get there after a little while, I find anyway. It's that sort of slow working on it. You couldn't have just sort of jumped there because you needed those mistakes in there in the first place as sort of like a background element. So after a bit of work with the multiply brush, get back to the screen brush and just highlight edges that might be where the crevices stick out. Hopefully that makes sense. So there's a bit of an edge coming across here as if this sticks in and then an edge sticking it out as well. I don't think that made much sense the way I was saying it there. But it's almost to where every crevice there's a highlight. Because there has to be a peak before a trough in a way. Okay, stepping back a bit, this side looks really interesting and nice. Perhaps more down here and up here. And this side looks quite nice as well. Obviously not much going on at the front here, but there's not much in our model either. So just toing and froing from the screen brush and the multiply brush. And I'm hardly changing my colour much at all really at this stage. So there's sort of an interesting tree base. I might work on it a bit more later, but you can get the idea of how it's going and what I'm doing. And you can see I'm probably going to go around doing bits and pieces more, but I'm quite pleased with how it's turning out. It's a good fun model, this one. And there's just a few areas like this where I'll want to put in a bit more detail. These trunks and branches and roots and so forth. And there it is in situ, possibly a little bit too contrasty compared to the rest now, so I've got to match it in a bit more. So I'll just do a bit more work on that. And usually the easy way to do that is to bring your brush in to the middle a bit more, and then use it to screen or multiply as you need. Maybe not that strong, just to get it a bit closer in terms of contrast. And you have to decide also which area you want to be closer to. And in this case, maybe these objects need to be closer to this one and give it more contrast and interest. But there we go, you can sort of see where I'm going with the trunk. Hopefully that's given you a few ideas and will help you in your work. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.